Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, this is episode 4 of the Career Talk series, where I bring on guests to discuss and share their career journeys. After multiple requests to do an episode on medical school, I've invited my cousin Navreen to share her journey to medical school. Before we get started, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Introducing all the way from California, Dr. Navreen Pandher.
Everyone, my name is Navreen Pandher, and I am an internal medicine doctor here in California.
So thank you so much for coming on to the channel. We're breaking the interview into 3 parts, starting with your undergrad and then med school and then residency and where you are right now. So the first question I have for you, why did you decide to go into medicine?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think one that everyone should really consider before pursuing medicine. So for me, it was a really personal decision. So I have type 1 diabetes. So healthcare was always something I was involved in and was heavily learning about. And my mom had breast cancer when I was 16. So again, I was in the healthcare environment a lot at a young age. And it sparked my interest in science as a result of that. Then as I was going through, high school, I really enjoyed science. I really enjoyed learning more about how our bodies work. And I think that it made it a kind of a natural decision to start looking into medical school.
So what was your undergrad major?
Grad major was biochemistry and molecular biology, and I had a minor in human development.
Okay.
So you don't have to do a science major for medical school, but I chose to do it because it helped me reach my requirements for medical school a little bit easier.
So I know you took a year off after graduation. So what did you do in that time?
So medical school takes about a year to apply to. So in the year that I took off after graduating from undergrad, I did research. I was applying to medical school, and I, was just trying to make sure I had enough time to go on interviews. So I think I juggled all of those things during that year off.
Okay. So did you study for your MCAT in that time as well?
I did not actually. So I studied for my MCAT between my 3rd and 4th year of undergrad. For me, I studied for 3 months. So it was 3 months of complete dedication to studying. I took a prep course. The one I took was the Princeton Review, but there's also Kaplan and others. I studied for my MCAT for those entire 3 months and took it at the end of those 3 months. But some people take a year, some people take many more months. So it just kind of depends on you and your study style.
How did you narrow down which schools you wanted to apply to?
So medical school is really competitive, and I wanted to make sure I had a really broad net so that I could get into medical school. So I applied only within the United States, and I mostly applied to the ones in California. So trying to stay close to family. And I applied to both osteopathic medical schools and the traditional MD schools.
So were you basing anything on like rankings or reputation?
That's a good question. I think for me, it didn't really matter about the ranking. It's more about what you put into the school rather than the prestige, etc. So for me, it didn't matter. For some people, it did, but for me, it did not.
Do you think doing research helped strengthen your application for med school?
Absolutely. Research is one of those things that medical schools look highly upon, especially if you're published. I was not prior to attending medical school, but having exposure to research indicates that you're, more likely to look towards doing that in medical school, and it helps a lot of medical schools get their name out there if you're in a lot of publications, etc.
Yeah.
It's not absolutely necessary, but I think it helps you kind of also narrow down your focus because some people realize within medicine they want to do research rather than clinical practice. It shows that you're interested and not just like going to medical school to go to medical school, but that you've actually done the work to see what doctors do, to see what the healthcare environment looks like, and you've been immersed in a healthcare setting that has patient-facing exposure. Absolutely. And you can even score like letters of recommendations through those opportunities. If doctors are working with you during those volunteer sessions, you can build really strong relationships with them. They can help put in a good word for you if they are associated with a academic program, and all of those things can only help, especially with applying to medical school.
So part of the medical school application process is interviews. So how did you prepare for your interviews?
For interviews, I did a lot of Googling, medical school interview questions, and you'll need to practice. So you have to do a lot of the like sitting in front of a mirror and practicing and seeing what your facial expressions look like.
Right.
There will still be curveball questions that you had no idea how to prepare for. And when I was applying, there was a lot of simulations, so patient interactions that you had to do. During those patient interactions, they just want to see how you are around normal people. How do you comfort someone when they just found out they have a disease, et cetera? So there's some interesting scenarios that they will give to you. And then, of course, you have to actually be passionate about wanting to do medicine, and making sure that that shows when you're describing why you want to go to medicine. So the most important answer you need to have is why medicine, and then why that particular medical school.
What is some advice you would give current undergraduates wanting to pursue medical school?
I would say to, really make sure that it is what you actually want within the scope of healthcare. So healthcare has so many different careers, stemming from things like physical therapy, which is a doctorate degree, to like physician assistant. So I think if you have the opportunity, try to learn and see what all those different careers are about. And if any one of those are something you're more interested in medicine, then that's something to consider heavily. I would also advise undergrads to start early and to make sure that you're beginning to build your resume early. It takes a lot of time to volunteer, to research, to study for the MCAT, to set aside money if that's something that's important to you to go to medical school. So I think the earlier you know, the better. But if you do decide later on in your undergrad timeline that you want to pursue medicine, then just making sure that you're taking those steps early to build the resume, because the hardest part is getting that application together. And if you're going to do it and you're putting in all that money to apply to medical schools, go do interviews, you want to put your best foot forward. So don't apply until you're absolutely ready.
We'll move into your time at med school. So what were the first 2 years like?
The first 2 years are very study heavy. So I'm talking 16 hours a day. 8 of those hours are just pure lectures. And then you spend the like remaining time just trying to study all that information that you got earlier in the day. So that's, I think, the toughest part, because each time you start a new class, you have to change how you were studying and adjust your mindset, because studying for anatomy will not be the same as studying for microbiology, and they're very different. So I think being flexible and understanding that you're going to be dedicating like 12 plus hours a day to just purely learning.
So a follow-up question with that as well is, how was it to adjust from undergrad teaching and learning to medical school?
Absolutely. It's a really tough transition. So I think many gifted, bright students start medical school and they've done so well, and that's how they ended up getting into the medical school. And that when you have your first couple of tests, it can be really discouraging. For example, I did not pass my first test in medical school. I was really scared, but I think it was a little bit of like a wake-up call that medical school studying just has to be different than what I've been doing previously. So I had to really think about what study style worked best for me. So whatever learning style you've noticed has worked for you in the past, it may or may not work in medical school, and you may have to adjust based on which topic you're learning.
Okay. Did you stay motivated throughout all of this?
Especially those first 2 years, you can get bogged down and lose motivation because you're not able to be around friends and family as often as you'd like. You miss a lot of events. So I think the way that I stayed motivated was to find time to schedule with family, friends, loved ones. For example, if I'm going through a really rough class, then knowing that in 2 weeks, I'm going to see my best friend for an afternoon or for a nice dinner, that helped me get through those rough patches. And having those built in was crucial because it gave me something to look forward to. Something else to consider was exercising a little bit more. I think having a little bit of like me time is so important. You don't have a lot of time for it. I think having that gives you self-care time that you need to be able to then actually focus when you're studying.
The beginning of third year, you start your rotations. Which area of medicine that you practice in, or is it more mandatory rotations?
Your third year, there's a lot of mandatory rotations because the programs want to make sure you're going through all the basic areas of medicine. So, internal medicine, pediatrics, obstetrics and gynecology, and surgery are kind of the big umbrella rotations that you have to do. And then beyond that, you get the opportunity to do electives, and that kind of helps you figure out what field of medicine you're going to apply for next.
So how did you decide which area you wanted to specialize in?
So some people will say pick the specialty you hate the least, but I think more than that, you have to determine what kind of lifestyle you like. The more heavy rotations are things like surgery, where you spend a lot of time at the hospital, while family medicine, internal medicine, you get a chance to speak more with patients and there's more patient interaction, and the job can be 9 to 5. So I think once you recognize, oh, okay, I actually like a blend of surgery and patient interactions and being able to do these like nights and weekends, then something like obstetrics could be a good opportunity. So I picked internal medicine because it gave me the opportunity to explore more subspecialties. So internal medicine is really broad. It's basically what you think of when you think of general medicine. And then while I was in internal medicine, I could see that if I wanted to, I could do cardiology. If I wanted to, I could do, a gastrointestinal focus. So there was lots of opportunities. I know plenty of people who knew right away that they wanted to do emergency medicine, for example. But for me, I wasn't really a procedure person. So that wasn't the right fit for me.
Yeah. So does the availability of certain specializations depend on a medical school? Or
it does depend on the medical school. So some medical schools have an affiliated hospital. So you already have a designated hospital where you do all your rotations. Other medical schools are private, so they're not affiliated with one specific hospital, and they vary in how they organize it. So it can be a little bit competitive if there's multiple people, for example, in your class who are interested in a particular specialty.
Right. Okay. The rotation competition like?
Applying to some rotations, there is competition, and this is especially important in your 4th year of medical school. So 4th year of medical school is when you start to kind of plan your career long term, and you're going to apply again to residency. And when you're applying to residency, there's auditions, or like basically a chance for the residency program to get to know you on a more personal level, and you rotate through that hospital or that program. So when I was applying, there was pretty hefty competition, but I think like persistence is key. So I do remember calling some of the places and asking, hey, if there's any available rotation for a medical student, I'm really interested in your internal medicine program and would love to rotate. That helps sometimes, and not all people like it when you call them, but for me, it worked out in places I was interested in.
And this clearly shows that like grades are not everything as well. Like you really need to be articulate and work well with others, but most people perceive it as you just have to have good grades. You got to be super smart. So they put all their emphasis and focus on that.
I think something that one of my mentors once said to me is that everyone is smart. Like everyone who is in medicine has done well at some point to be able to get there. But what makes you unique is your story and your specific strengths. And I think that that was such good advice, because patients, you get asked questions by the senior doctors, and I didn't always know the answer, but I was eager to learn. So I would say, I'm not sure what the answer is, but I will go find out what it is and I will get back to you. Or, I would say, I'm not sure, but I know XYZ, so that at least you're supporting your learning and saying that even though I don't know that, I do know this part about that disease, etc. So I think it's really easy to compare yourself and then just be like, well, I'm not going to even try because so-and-so next to me is doing much better. But for me, that advice kind of stayed with me, where it's like, well, what makes me special from the person next to me, and how do I show that I'm still really interested? See that you try and that you're curious about something, and the know-it-all doesn't always actually end up doing as well.
So if you could go back in time, is there anything you would do differently in med school?
I think if I could go back in time for medical school, I would be a lot more forgiving. I think I was really hard on myself for a lot of studying, always wanting to do better. During that time, there were times when I felt like, oh man, I don't know if I'm cut out for this, etc. And I would also do a lot more for my own wellness. I think I put that on the back burner, just to make sure I get that extra hour of studying in. But I think in hindsight, I would give myself more credit and more time to take care of myself.
What was the application process like for residency?
So the application process for residency is pretty similar to applying to medical school. So you still need a personal statement, you still need letters of recommendation, you still need good grades or whatever, good good scores on your exams. And then in addition to that, there's one unique aspect that is special for residency, and that's having basically an accumulation of all the reviews you've gotten during your rotations. So all those rotations you do as a third year, the doctors you worked with write comments about you as a student. So if someone made a comment like the student consistently showed up late to rotations, for example, like that could be a bad sign on your application. It's not an end all be all, but just something that is included in your application.
Yeah. So looking back, was it all worth it?
For me, it was worth it. I think that people who regret it are the ones who maybe didn't know what they were getting into. And I think people who regret it may have had misconceptions about medicine, about like how glamorous being in medicine can be, and it's not. It's a lot more humbling than that. So I think.
So the last question, do you have any advice you would give prospective medical students?
I would tell them to just be open to learning, be kind to your patients and their family members, and admit it when you don't know something. You don't know something, just say it, and then that's a learning opportunity. That's the best way to grow.
All right, well, that's it for me with the questions. Thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we finish up?
No, this is great. I think that I may not have all the answers, but this was just my experience, and I'm not speaking for my programs or my medical school. I think for medical students, just ask questions. Ask everyone how they like their field. Why did you pick anesthesiology? Why did you pick this field? I think if you don't ask, you won't know, and you get to learn more about people and why they chose to do what they do. So yeah, ask questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below to let me know how you like this video. Cheers!